Okay,
How you doing?
I'm well.
Well, so how are you feeling about the results?
Well, disappointed, but on the other hand, it's elections, and I don't think that you can predict with a lot of accuracy. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And this is one of those moments in time where, because of local issues, external issues, a lot of people came out and voted, way more than regularly vote in Democratic primaries. And so you don't have any way to reach them because you don't know them. They haven't come out on a regular basis, so you've never communicated to them. And they tend to, they may pick the first name first. There's a certain percentage that do that. And then some of it seems around the United States, as I understand from research, it's not my personal opinion, that women are going to vote more often than men and more often vote for women. So you have a combination of things, I think, that contributed to the outcome here. Need to.
Glasses. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
We're going to get there.
All right.
Well, so what do you think voters were responding to, though?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a sharp contrast between the two of us. And you would have to go ask individual voters. I mean, there's some voters who really, as you know, I mean, we all do, I'm sure, vote in a race that we're not really certain who's the most qualified or not because there's so many names on the ballots. And this time was a 7-page ballot, and this was towards the end. So I have no idea as to what motivated anybody to vote for me. I mean, I think amongst the party regulars, there was a perception that, I would win, but I was careful and cautious about that.
Were you concerned?
Yeah, I was concerned as the voting was happening and we were seeing the categories of people who were voting, and it was very obvious that the number of people who don't usually vote were voting at very, very high numbers. And so, in fact, so usually there's about 124,000 voters in a Democratic primary. That particular number of people who we haven't seen very often or at all, about 150,000. So they outperform the regulars. And so when you have that situation, there's no way you could know to communicate to them. And so however they vote, whatever's natural to them is what they do.
So let's obviously you've been DA now for almost 8 years.
Right.
I want to kind of walk back, through your tenure. I remember early on when you first got here, there was some controversy surrounding the decision not to prosecute some low-level offenses.
Right.
It was called the theft of necessity policy. What were you hoping to accomplish with those changes?
Well, I was hoping that we wouldn't, once again, if it's truly poverty and not for profit, it's not a booster, for example, we're not going to actually wind up with a better outcome by putting that person in jail and giving them a criminal record, because then it impairs them. And there's lots of research on it. When I put the policy in, of course, there's a lot of controversy, but I always knew, and I think you knew it also, that the first $100 goes to the city. And so as we looked at this policy year in and year out, before we had the policy, we accepted 98 or 99% of that category of cases, and it did not change during the policy. So the idea that we created a crime wave was false. And actually, I don't know if the police really pick up those people, if they really prosecute them fully as they could, or if they take them to municipal court and try to solve the problem. I think there's some of that goes on. So we never really saw a difference, and so that's why after the first term, or in between, or right before the end of the first term, I eliminated the policy because it didn't have any impact on anything.
What did you learn from that experience?
Well, what I learned was there are lots of other DA's offices in the state and around the country that don't prosecute those cases, and they just never said it. So even a Republican state senator says, it seems to me that the problem here is that you announced it. And I said, I think you're right. So
Sometimes better to do stuff a little
Yeah, I mean there has been some research on other DA's offices, so-called progressive DAs, and so they were able to look at a long term of a particular policy, and there had been a Republican predecessor, and the reason they were able to look a longer term of the impact of the policies because the Republican predecessor had the same exact policy, but just didn't say anything about it. Whereas the incoming person said, we're going to do this, that, and the other. And so they went back and studied and showed that it had no positive impact, no increase in crime type impact. And in fact, it was helpful to the individual. So sometimes, what I learned from that is sometimes you just do things and you don't say it.
Don't trumpet it, so to speak.
Say it again?
You don't trumpet it, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So there was also a decision made not to prosecute most first-time marijuana possession cases. What was the thinking behind that policy?
That's actually the policy in most of the state. So between 2013 and when I took office, I was in private practice, and I practiced across the state. And I mean rural counties, urban counties. What's going on, the reality of what's really going on is what we do today, and that is these cases are taken on first-time offenders into the office, and they're dismissed in 30, 60, 90 days. And that happens in mostly Republican counties because in this state, there are only 6 or 7 at the most Democratic DA's offices. So as I went around the state and I saw that practice, what I also saw, and the numbers showed, was that year in and year out, it's 90% black and brown that get arrested for that particular offense. And as I got in office and looked at the probable cause affidavits and things that were, close to being contrived, if not contrived, or for some de minimis reason, for example, not putting your tail light on so many feet before you turn. I mean, probably all of us violate that all day, every day. And yet, certain teenagers are being pulled over and they find a small amount of marijuana and they take them to jail. But I think the thing that helped was, number one, I think that everybody has someone in their family or in their past when they were in school, college, or a co-worker or an elderly relative or friend who in some way ingests THC. I think it's become much more common these days. And so the reality of it is, are we going to lock up your friends and family? So are we going to lock up these kids under the premise that pulling them over, we're going to find a dead body in the trunk, which is never true. So it was easy to put that policy in. Now, the interesting thing is, since I've been in office, the law has changed. We have to prosecute every case, but that includes these types of dispositions. We did a 2018-2025 examination of the number of misdemeanor marijuana cases filed with us from the police agencies, and it was a 74% drop. So even the police are thinking about what they're doing and who they're impacting and whether this really has a positive impact on reducing crime.
Okay. So you've often been You've often been labeled a progressive prosecutor. Do you think that label accurately described you?
I don't know, because people use it derisively for the most part. I think what I am is a problem solver. I will definitely label myself that. And we have not done well in mental health. I think everybody, I don't care what party you're from or where you live or who you identify as far as criminal justice and mental health and public safety is concerned, we have not done that well, and we have tried to change that and been successful in it here in the office in changing that. We have a much more robust program. We work more closely with the sheriff than ever before. We work more closely with the county commissioners and outside organizations to address this. We still have ongoing plans. I don't know where they'll end up in the future, but we want to be a part of the conversation. And so, we keep doing these things. We're going to keep doing them.
Talk to me a little bit more about the mental health aspect. I actually interviewed Terry Bentley Hill the other day on a separate matter, but she was talking about working with y'all's your mental health?
Well, when I got into office, or before I got into office, there were 4 different attorneys in 4 different sections of the office, and somehow they had control of mental health, but there was no consistency about it from person to person, who's eligible and who's not, who they feel comfortable with, et cetera. So basically, I took a business approach to this, as I do on everything, okay? If you're at HEB and you're the manager, you need to get the produce in and out, right? And you need to do it the right way with the right people. And so we expanded that from 4 people to 24 people, but it's not just lawyers, it's also paralegals, it's also case managers, it's also peer support, and it's also medical support. And we work with other nonprofits to hopefully find housing if that's what someone needs. And so what we have is a 15 to 20% recidivism rate, where the national average for people with those diagnoses in criminal justice is 50 to 70%. So it's working.
So y'all created a division, and what's it called?
Well, the larger division is the Restorative Justice Division. That's the mental health division under that.
Okay. And was that created during your tenure?
Well, it was loosely here, but more formally, yes, more structured. So my background, as you know, was a drug court judge, and so I was required to take a lot of training, and that was kind of the early days. So what I did here in Dallas was the very first drug treatment court in the state of Texas, as far as the size and the complexity and the cases, et cetera. And we had such good results, we were actually okay. I got an award as new drug court pioneer. I was my efforts were recognized by being in the Drug Court Hall of Fame. I currently am, but I also became a teacher, and I taught teams of individuals from urban and rural and suburban jurisdictions on how to implement, start, and maintain a drug court. You know, starting it is one thing, but doing it in such a way that it has a positive impact on a community that can be verified is the way you institutionalize something. So all of that training I've brought to this office, and I've been able to implement programs. Every program we have implemented is working. We have one that's not quite working the way we want it to. I mean, it is successful, but it's not quite the original individuals that we intended it for.
So you came into the office wanting to change the way the DA's office approached justice. Looking back, what are some of the things you're most proud of?
Well, I think that the Conviction Integrity Unit, led by Cynthia Garza, to take a case from 1956, Tommy Lee Walker, and recognize that the system dropped the ball and probably intentionally killed an innocent man, just to calm the community. That's significant. I think Benjamin Spencer, who had been looked at by many administrations since the 80s or early 90s, I think late 80s, and had been denied justice, that we were able to do a deep dive in that with truly what I call deconstructing and reconstructing these cases. We were able to achieve justice for him. I think, once again, the Mental Health Division achieves justice for people who are otherwise marginalized or ignored. I think that the reforms that we're seeing the police even do in marijuana filings, I think that's significant. But one of the most significant things that we haven't spoken about is juvenile justice reform. And I think you know that I paid for a study that came out in March of 2023 that really showed us that we were doing poorly in the processing of the cases. And if you're doing poorly in the processes, you're most likely, your outcomes are not very good. So there was a lot of angst about that, a lot of upset people that it pointed fingers at us too. And so we did actually work, and have been and still are working with the juvenile department. And the follow-up report on that is coming out soon, and it's going to show that everything's been turned 180 with the exception of one particular metric. And we're going to work on getting that before I get out of here, if we can get that turned around.
What advice would you give the next district attorney?
how any of my friends, or they were going to be friends because they got elected, especially in the big counties, I'm going to clean my language up, but basically I said, you don't know anything and don't think you do. Whatever it is you think you know, you really don't. You have no idea what this job is about, especially in a county like this where you have the county courts, you have the JP courts, you have the district courts, you're representing the county in federal court and state court, you have a juvenile division, you have presence in the family courts. I mean, we have 300 lawyers, almost 300 lawyers here. So, and then you have the relationship with each individual police chief. And for the most part, they're fairly united, but they have their own needs and challenges in their communities. And so you have to, balance a lot of things out in this job. And I think being calm and thinking things through and not being don't get too excited where the first decision might be a bad decision. I think, you need to, once again, realize you don't know everything and take your time in making big decisions.
So what's next?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's too early on to tell. My mom lives in Houston and she's 98 and she's doing real great. In fact, I was home last weekend. She got an award, believe it or not. And so I have family there. I have nieces and nephews, and I have a home here, of course. And so we'll see. There's time to think about that.
Any thought on maybe an independent run?
I don't think that's legally possible, so I haven't thought about it, no.
Okay.
So.
I'm looking back through my list to see, because I...
Okay, take your time. I'm going to get some coffee.
And I'm just keeping an eye on the clock, too.
Yeah, Judge, you have an 11 a.m. with Fargo.
They got
it's an in-house meeting.
And I'm not far from being done.
Okay,
I
don't worry about it. I think you're fine on time.
So we'll go back to some of the career reflection questions. What surprised you most about being district attorney that you didn't fully appreciate before you took the job?
The complexity of it. Once again, it's, my day is never whatever the schedule says. Okay, there are crises that come up because this is a 600-person office, almost 300 lawyers. And with all the divisions and the problems and the issues, and then you have state issues, you have Ken Paxton issues, you have Washington issues. All of a sudden a grant goes away, or they tell you it's going away, and it's a gang grant. I mean, you're prosecuting some of the most violent cases, and they tell you that it's going to go away, so that means you're going to lose all the staff. And what do you do? I mean, do you go to the county? Well, the county is, running lean right now, and so those are the kinds of things that hit you on a day-to-day basis that you're not necessarily expecting, but they demand your attention and they take time.
So you're saying that the new DA is going to get quite the education.
Every DA in the state of Texas, who I know, especially in the large counties, is, myself included, is unprepared for the complexities of this job.
A couple more. So you recently joined a coalition of prosecutors that were, pushing back against federal overreach and emphasizing that federal agents could face state prosecution if they violate state law. What motivated you to take that step?
Well, what I saw and on television, as far as Miss Good and I can't remember the man's name, the nurse, the ICU nurse, the way it was, being described by the former Secretary, Christy Nome, and what was on the video. I mean, that's quite common down here for people to tell us. It could be a civilian, it could be an interested witness, it could be the police or whatever. It is quite common for somebody to describe something and you look at the video and they don't match, right? That's not unusual for us. So to look at those videos and see what I expect would be condemned by local police. In fact, some organization of police chiefs did condemn those killings. Looked to me like justice was not going to be served and perhaps it would be left up to the local authorities. And so my goal was to be of assistance to others. I think they have raised some money. Unfortunately, during the campaign, I was not able to participate in a discussion where maybe some experts and things. I don't really know. I wasn't on it. But I think it was very helpful and useful in talking about the use of force and federal officials, et cetera, in a state court. I think those are some of the things gone over. So, my goal is to, if I could, be a resource to those who may need it. I mean, we here have enough resources and availability of money, whereas some smaller jurisdictions who joined in, they're not in the same position. So,
What do you want people to say about John Creuzot, about your tenure?
It's an interesting thing. I guess maybe lots of little things, you could stitch them together. Am I supposed to be here in Dallas, Texas? I'm from Ninth Ward, New Orleans. I'm not supposed to be the DA. You wouldn't expect that from being from Ninth Ward, New Orleans. So that's one thing. I had some cousins point out to me that how much I've accomplished without having family ties, how much politically and et cetera, being a judge and a district attorney. And I hadn't thought about that until they said, I really don't. And I did do it literally on my own here in Dallas. But the other thing I think that's most important is that when I saw problems, I tried to solve them. And I educated myself starting back in the early 1990s on what research means to criminal justice and how they're often misaligned, and trying to align. And I think we did that with divert court. That's why we had the phenomenal outcomes. That's why divert court model and philosophy was adopted by the state in the mid-2000s, and we had a projected need of 167,000 prison beds. Then they put this in, we're at 136,000, so save billions of dollars in tax money. And I think, once again, just taking a common sense approach, being very fair, being ethical, and showing that these political jobs can be worked at hard and focused and deliver value to the citizens of the county. And I hope that's where it comes out.
Anything you'd say about Judge Givens?
No, just other than best of luck. And once again, I would say this to any and everybody, and they have, by the way, they have called me back and confirmed, you're right. I wasn't ready for this. I think the most recent one was the Harris County DA. I told him, by the way, you don't, I'm going to use the exact language, you don't know anything. And it's going to be like a fire hose straight in your face. I think about 6 months later, he's like, my God, you were correct. And I said, yeah. So, I've always offered my help. And some of us talk about policy things and office things. And, when Sharon Wilson was in office, she and Greg Willis and I, because we're so close and the larger counties right here, we actually had a regular, quarterly or so, I don't remember the time frame, meeting. And we have a lot in common. It really doesn't matter about Republican and Democrat and all of that. These offices have a lot in common.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Yep.
It's been a good 8 years.
Yeah, I think so. Not quite 8, but we're getting there. Almost 8.
We've known each other a long time.
Oh, you and I, yeah. We go back to when the Rocky Mountains were just hills.
Well, that we do.
Yeah.